Mom and Sarah are going to live in this house too. With so many adults around, raising the kids should be easier. Of course, all the housework will be done by Mary. If you don't like that, the only option is divorce.
I was stunned that my husband thought he could manipulate me with the threat of divorce. I often wondered what he thought his worth was as a husband. But I decided to set my delusional husband straight. I've already filed for divorce, so we're not a couple anymore. My name is Mary. I met William through work. William was incredibly kind and gentlemanly while we dated, and I fell for him. But after getting married, William's true colors began to show. William had moved out of his family home when he started working and had lived alone for a while. He should understand the difficulties of managing a household, yet he pushed all the chores on me, even though we both worked. Whenever I suggested that we share the household chores, he would groan and refuse. He always argued that since he earned more than me, I should be responsible for all the housework, always evading his responsibilities. The thought of divorce crossed my mind several times, but I was already over 30. I feared that a woman over 30 with a history of divorce would find it challenging to remarry, so I put up with William's behavior. I knew that my grandmother had divorced when she was young and had lived a lonely life until her death. For me, the decision to divorce seemed like an enormous hurdle. By nature, I dreaded loneliness and wasn't ready to face a future on my own. This was the case even when my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, Sarah, treated me poorly. William's family lived near our house. My mother-in-law and Sarah often dropped by uninvited, spending time in our home as if it was theirs. William always said it was okay since they were family. He even gave them a spare key to our house, so they did as they pleased. Despite not lifting a finger to help, my mother-in-law and Sarah always had complaints. Complaining about dirt, saying they were hungry, the list went on. I asked William multiple times to tell them not to come over unannounced. William always dismissed my concerns, saying,
"That's just the way Mom and Sarah are."
When I finally broke down, telling him I couldn't deal with them anymore, he, for some reason, produced divorce papers. Wait, what? Are you saying we're getting divorced?
It's not like that. It's just in case. If we have the divorce papers ready, you and I can split any time. If it bothers you so much, I'll ask my mom and Sarah not to visit often. We're having a baby soon. From now on, I'm putting you first. As a sign of my commitment, let's be ready to divorce at any moment.
Honestly, I couldn't trust what William was saying. He always prioritized his mother and Sarah over me. He never really put me first. But with the recent news of my pregnancy, maybe William was starting to change. If he's serious about this commitment and wants to draft the divorce papers, then let's do it. So I filled them out with him.
I hope we never have to use these papers. I'll change.
William promised. I wanted to believe him, even if just a little. Probably because I remembered how kind he was when we were dating. True to his word, William called his mother and Sarah, asking them not to visit as often. It seemed he told them I was sensitive during my pregnancy and needed space. They seemed upset, but they understood for the sake of the baby. Life without unexpected visits from them was so much more peaceful. If I just stopped expecting William to help around the house, he was a considerate husband, especially with me being pregnant. I convinced myself that the problem was my expectations, so I stopped expecting anything from William. As long as he's trying to care for our family and me, that's all that matters. I didn't even mind doing all the housework anymore. Then, as my due date approached, I approached William with a request. William, there's something I'd like to ask. Can I give birth back in my hometown?
Why do you need to give birth in your hometown?
My hometown is a plane ride away. It seemed William assumed I'd deliver our baby here, but after much thought, I wanted to do it in my hometown. Since things were tense with his mother and Sarah, I felt it would be hard to rely on them if I needed help post-delivery. With my own parents, I could be more at ease and less stressed about the delivery. I hinted at these reasons, and after some thought, William agreed. But when I told mother-in-law and Sarah that I couldn't rely on them, I was shocked when they responded, "Why?" William had seen mother-in-law and Sarah barge into our home and constantly complain to me. This made me wonder if William even noticed or cared. It made me question if we could raise a child together. So when I went back home, I quietly took the already filled out divorce papers with me. I hoped I'd never need them. However, my wishes didn't come true. Once I returned to my hometown, I enjoyed some peaceful days at my parents' house. They took great care of me, eagerly awaiting their grandchild. I occasionally video called William. We chatted about our unborn baby and our lives, enjoying our conversations. Then, the day of the birth came. I gave birth to our son with all my might. William couldn't come due to work, so I sent him photos and videos of our newborn. He always said he couldn't wait to meet our son over the phone. Out of courtesy, I informed mother-in-law, Sarah, and father-in-law about the birth. Only father-in-law responded, blessing us and offering help if we ever needed it. Mother-in-law and Sarah seemed to enjoy bad-mouthing me, but father-in-law always had my back. I got an unexpected call from father-in-law. The content was shocking, making me decide something significant. A few days after father-in-law's call, I arrived back in the town where William and I lived. William, having taken a leave, was waiting at home. We didn't have a car, so I took the train and bus back. Ringing the doorbell, William opened the door with a big smile.
"Welcome back, Mary. Where's the baby?"
Expecting me to bring our child, he was surprised by my minimal luggage. Ignoring his confused question, I just said, "I'm back," and stepped inside. Inside the coat closet, several pairs of women's shoes confirmed that father-in-law's call was indeed true. "Why are there so many women's shoes here?" I playfully asked William. William responded,
"Mom and Sarah are moving in with us. It'll be easier to raise the baby with more adults around. Of course, Mary will do the housework. If you don't like it, divorce is the only option."
It seemed William had conveniently forgotten the promise he made to prioritize me above all else. The call I received from my father-in-law before returning here was a warning. Father-in-law had served as a public official for years and is now working 3 days a week in a re-employment scheme. Mother-in-law had always been a homemaker since they got married. However, as father-in-law started spending more days at home, she abruptly stopped doing the housework. Skilled at multitasking, father-in-law managed to juggle work and household chores. Yet, fed up with mother-in-law's lazy lifestyle and years of pent-up frustrations, he decided to divorce her. The house belonged to father-in-law's parents initially, so the property is in father-in-law's name. Mother-in-law would have to move out, and father-in-law assumed the only place for her to go was with William. If mother-in-law came to William's, then Sarah, a 26-year-old with zero work experience and currently unemployed, would also move in. Father-in-law informed me of this. Though father-in-law apologized for the inconvenience, it helped me make a decisive choice about my future. How deluded was William to think I'd accept mother-in-law and Sarah moving in, or else face divorce. William seemed proud that he earned more than I did. But however high his income, that's just his value at work. I calmly informed William that his standing in our household, from a wife's perspective, was at its lowest. "I've already filed for divorce, so you and I aren't a couple anymore."
"What? You're joking, right? We just had a baby. Without a father around, the baby will suffer. It'll be hardest for you."
"It won't be hard. My parents at home are willing to help with childcare. In fact, I left the baby with them to come here today. Here's the key." When I handed the key to William, it seemed he finally grasped the situation. His face turned pale, and he asked,
"This is a joke, right?"
"Why would I lie about something like this?" I retorted. A commotion drew the attention of mother-in-law and Sarah. They arrived expecting to see the child, their faces brightening at the thought, but sensing the tension between William and me, their smiles faltered.
"What's going on? Where's the child?"
It was a flustered William who responded to mother-in-law's urgent query. Pointing at me, much like a child tattling to their parent, he declared,
"She's trying to divorce me behind my back."
It was pitiful seeing him like this. Whatever love and affection I once felt for William seemed to evaporate in that very moment. Mother-in-law and Sarah were livid upon hearing about the divorce papers.
"Why would you do something so rash?"
they demanded. I took a deep breath and said, "I never felt like I got along with you, mother-in-law, or you, Sarah. Constant complaints and being belittled was draining. I asked William to prioritize my feelings over yours. He promised to do so, even drafting the divorce papers as a gesture of commitment. But when he broke that promise, I felt I had no choice but to file them." Mother-in-law snapped.
"The only reason you and I don't get along is that you don't keep up with the housework. You should be grateful. Sarah and I are here to help, especially since you clearly can't manage both housework and childcare."
I retorted, "It's rich coming from someone who was kicked out by father-in-law. He told me you two are divorcing too." I made sure to thank him for all his patience over the years.
"So he told you?"
Mother-in-law exploded, her face red with anger, while Sarah looked visibly sour. "Come on, Mom," Sarah interjected with a mocking smirk. "It's probably for the best. Mary was never up to the task anyway." "The last thing I want is to be called incompetent by someone like you, Sarah." It was clear I wanted my own piece of revenge against Sarah. During my pregnancy, she'd often come over uninvited. Using my gaming console without permission, she'd throw the controller in frustration when she lost, which once resulted in it breaking. Instead of offering compensation or even a simple apology, she had the audacity to tell me to replace it. William's refusal to stand up for me against such blatant disrespect was one of the driving factors behind our divorce. Seeing Sarah maintain her disdainful expression was more than I could bear. Since we've been family all this time, I never spoke up out of respect, but considering this might be the last time we meet, I have something to say. Sarah, you should consider working. Being in your late 20s with zero work experience will make job hunting tough. Best of luck moving forward." "Why should I be the one hearing this?" "I'm claiming a settlement from William in the divorce. Times might get tough financially, so please support him." "Settlement in the divorce? Did my brother do something to you, Mary?" While exasperated by their ignorance, I quickly pulled out my phone. I played the audio recordings of the harsh words from mother-in-law and Sarah and William's irresponsible remarks that I'd discreetly saved. The trio turned beet red and lunged to snatch the phone from me. Backing away from the approaching trio, I warned, "Everything right now is being recorded. We're no longer a family. If you get violent, this becomes a criminal case. If you don't want to deal with the police, I suggest you keep your hands to yourselves." Finally grasping the gravity of the situation, mother-in-law broke into tears, sobbing,
"This is all happening because William married such a woman."
William shouted,
"Mom, you always said Mary was a good servant who listened well."
Sarah yelled, "I can't work. Absolutely not. Brother should pay for everything. It's all his fault for marrying Mary in the first place." Watching the three of them shift blame onto each other was both foolish and ugly. I addressed the trio without even looking their way. The reason I came today was to offer my gratitude one last time. While there have been rough patches, we've related as family. There were times I was grateful for your presence. Thank you. From now on, my lawyer will handle everything, so please refrain from contacting me directly. I said my goodbyes and left the arguing family behind. I never met with William or his family again. I left everything to my lawyer, who claimed the divorce settlement. William promptly paid up. However, news of William being sued for a settlement by his ex-wife became gossip at his workplace. This led to William becoming a layoff candidate. Eventually, he was advised to resign, and he did. Now he's apparently spending his days job hunting. Sarah and mother-in-law argued nearly every day, until Sarah decided to leave the house. Though Sarah managed to find a job at a regular company, she had no experience in the working world. She was treated as if she couldn't contribute at work and felt overwhelmed. With Sarah gone, mother-in-law ended up living with William and took on all household responsibilities. Since William was job hunting and tight on cash, she started working at a local grocery store. William often heard complaints from mother-in-law and was emotionally drained from it all. All this info about the trio was shared by father-in-law. From the time we got married, father-in-law has always been good to me. I wanted at least father-in-law to see my child, and when we visited, he was overjoyed. Father-in-law gets along great with my parents, and occasionally drops by my childhood home to see how his grandchild is doing. I got a job near my parents' house and earn enough to support my child comfortably. My child is growing up healthy and active. Though I felt guilty for keeping my son away from his father, seeing him smile assures me that I made the right decision. Even without his dad around, I strive to provide a fulfilling life for my son. I'll continue to do my best in both my job and parenting every single day.
I hosted a dinner for my sons in-laws and our family. While I was preparing the meal, Karen looked at the dishes and scoffed. "For a family gathering, pizza is the way to go!" Immediately after, my son silently began to clear the table, and seeing this, Karen's face changed as she exclaimed, "I'm never coming back here." Then Donnie said something astonishing. "I'm Marilyn, recently turned 50. My husband passed away from cancer 5 years ago, and now I live with my 28-year-old son. He's been dating Julian, a woman he met at work for about 2 years. One day, Lucas approached me with a serious look and said, 'Mom, I'm going to marry Julian.' I'd met Julian a few times when she visited our home, so I knew her well. I told Lucas, 'You should decide who you marry, but I'd like you and Julian to formally tell me together about your marriage.' 'Right, I get it. Next time, Julian and I will come and tell you about our marriage,' he replied. The following Sunday, Lucas brought Julian over. 'I'll be marrying Lucas. I'm looking forward to being part of your family.' Julian was always polite and kind, so I felt relieved and accepted her marriage proposal. 'Lucas can be stubborn, but please take good care of him.' 'Mom, we're planning to leave here after we get married. That's okay with you, right?' Hearing this, I was so happy, I teared up a bit. 'Mom, what's wrong? Why are you crying?' Wiping my tears, I said, 'I was just thinking about how lonely I'd be if you left home after getting married. But knowing that you and Julian will live here with me makes me so happy. Thank you.' 'Mom, what are you talking about? It's natural for a son to live with his mother.' I was deeply moved by Lucas' thoughtful nature. That night, the three of us chatted and ate dinner late into the evening, and Julian ended up staying over. 'Lucas, Julian can share your room, right?' 'Yeah, that's fine.' Alone in my room, I thought about how my husband would have been happy to see this and found myself crying again. 3 months passed, and Lucas married Julian. Their wedding, per Julian's parents' request, was a small, family-only affair without a reception. This decision brought some relief, as Karen, Julian's mother, had been causing stress with her unreasonable demands. For example, "Obviously, the groom's side will pay for the entire ceremony. We won't pay a dime. Our relatives are far from away, so you'll cover their travel and hotel expenses. And yes, we'll need first-class tickets for the airplane. One of my relatives doesn't have a dress for the wedding, so we're buying one. Please, cover that cost too." I was speechless at the audacity. While it's not unusual for the groom's side to cover these ceremony costs, demanding that we pay for green card tickets, meals, and even clothing expenses was just too much. But for Lucas' sake, I held back my words. I'll take care of the expenses, so please provide all the receipts. Oh, how rude! Asking for receipts? Are you saying you don't trust me? It's not about trust, but I can't pay without knowing the amounts. I clenched my back teeth, maybe even grinding them audibly. I was convinced I could never get along with this person. Thankfully, the stress-filled wedding ended safely, and I felt a huge relief. Sensing my feelings, Lucas said, "Mom, that was tough, huh? Sorry about all this." I felt bad being apologized to by Lucas. "Why are you apologizing, Lucas? Your happiness with Julian is all I wish for." "Thanks, Mom," he said, holding my hand. Holding Lucas' large hand, I whispered to my husband in heaven to keep watching over them. Lucas and Julian went on a 2-week honeymoon in Europe. Shockingly, Karen wanted to tag along, leading to an argument with Julian's dad, Donnie. Eventually, Julian placated Karen with promises of lots of souvenirs. I was thrilled receiving photos and messages from Lucas on WhatsApp during their trip. I showed these photos to my colleagues at the office, where I work as an administrative assistant during breaks. They all agreed that Lucas and Julian are a perfect couple. When they returned from their honeymoon, they first visited me with loads of souvenirs. "Thanks for all these gifts." "It's nothing much. Oh, and this one is for Dad." Lucas had bought a tie for my late husband. I'm sure he's delighted in heaven. "Next time we travel abroad, Mom, you should come with us. Julian wants that too." "Marilyn, let's definitely do that." Moved by their kind words, I teared up. Lucas, noticing, said, "Mom, you cry so easily these days. Is it because you're getting older?" He said with a laugh. "Maybe so. I am 50 now, after all." After Lucas and Julian went to their room, I placed the tie for my husband by his photo and whispered, "Dad, Lucas bought you a gift. He's grown into such a kind man. I'm so happy." In that moment, I felt as if I heard my husband's thank you from heaven. Later, Lucas and Julian visited her family home, but Karen seemed displeased. She erupted. "Why didn't you come here first? I bet you gave them more gifts. How much did you spend on their gifts?" "Mom, what are you saying? We didn't do that," Julian protested. "You can say anything. I might just go check their gifts right now," Karen retorted. "Mom, aren't you embarrassed saying that?" "Why should I be embarrassed, Julian? You've become so cheeky. Brainwashed by that man, perhaps?" Unable to bear it, Donnie interjected. "Karen, enough! What are you saying in front of Lucas?" Karen, enraged by Donnie's comment, accused. "I'm saying this because of him. He married Julian for our family's wealth. I should lock everything valuable up." Lucas, called a gold digger, stayed silent, finding it all too ridiculous. But Julian, hurt by Karen's harsh words, broke into tears. "Mom, please, just stop," she begged. Following her, Donnie added, "Right, why does Karen always have to badmouth Lucas and Marilyn?" "It's not badmouthing. I'm just telling the truth. And you never think about anything? Always just TV and newspapers." Donnie finally exploded in anger after Karen's repeated insults. "Enough! Just stop talking and go to the other room." It was rare for Donnie, usually so reserved, to raise his voice in anger. Karen was shocked and started crying. Seeing them, Julian also shed tears. Lucas gently put his arm around Julian and said, "Julian, maybe we should head back home." She nodded faintly, and they returned to my house. "You're back early?" Lucas told me what happened at Julian's family home. Listening to his story, Julian teared up and then turned to me. I'm sorry for my mother causing trouble for Mr. Lucas. Hearing this, Lucas turned to Julian. Don't have to apologize for anything, Julian. It doesn't bother me at all. Cheer up. Exactly. You shouldn't worry about it, Julian. But I wonder why Karen would say such things. Julian just stayed silent. I know, right? It's not something to say in front of Julian. She's a bit off, that one. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize, Julian. Julian remained tearful for a long time. The following Friday, Lucas told me, Julian's parents are coming over next Sunday. Are you okay with that? They might say a lot again. I'll prepare for it. Make sure to ask Julian what her parents like to eat. Got it. That day, Julian told me Donnie and Karen's favorite treats. Sorry, it's all sweets, but they're in a good mood when they have them, Julian said with a smile. Then, Sunday arrived. Julian's parents came by taxi in the evening. Greeting them at the door, Julian said, Did you take a taxi? Wasn't it expensive? It's only a 10-minute walk from the station. It's not big deal. Marilyn will pay us back for the taxi fare anyway. Here, this is the receipt. Karen showed the taxi receipt. When Julian and her parents entered the living room, Karen looked around boldly. Seeing me, she said, Here, this is for the taxi fare. And tell the driver to keep the change. Reluctantly, I took the receipt from Karen. Donnie, watching this, frowned and said, Karen, don't be so disgraceful. Karen glared at Donnie. What's disgraceful about it? We're at our daughter's fiancé's house. It's only natural they pay for our taxi, or you could pay for it. Donnie, faced with Karen's words, looked annoyed but said nothing. I had my doubts about paying the taxi fare, but didn't want to cause a scene, so I paid as asked. I received it, but it's common sense to bring your own money for such things. I wanted to say I had never heard of such a common sense, but I held back. After that, I decided to get dinner ready right away. I arranged a sweet-themed meal, just like Julian had told me. Upon seeing the spread, Karen's eyes lit up and she exclaimed, Oh, this looks delicious. I haven't even tasted it yet, but I can tell just by looking.
Yeah, let's eat.
Karen and Donnie started eating voraciously, especially Karen, who ate as if she hadn't had a meal in days. After devouring everything, they were in a noticeably better mood, just as Julian had predicted. Lucky Lucas, getting to eat such amazing food every day since birth.
Yeah, Mom's cooking is always delicious.
I replied, pleased by the compliment, even if it was just flattery. Donnie chimed in.
Great meal. I'd like to have this more often.
Karen, sensitive to Donnie's casual remark, snapped back. Are you implying my cooking is bad? If you don't like it, feel free to eat instant meals every day, or maybe get someone else to cook for you. Donnie, looking exasperated, replied,
I didn't mean that. Your cooking is delicious too.
But Karen wasn't pacified. Oh, please, you're just saying that. You probably eat it reluctantly every day. It's so not fun eating with you. Julian, clearly upset, intervened. Enough already. This is embarrassing. Why should I be embarrassed, Julian? I haven't said anything shameful. Seeing them heating up, I decided to serve the sweet coffee Julian had taught me about. Rushing to the kitchen, I brewed the coffee and added extra sugar, then brought it to Karen and Donnie. Let's cool it with the chatter and have some coffee, shall we? Coffee? I didn't ask for it, but okay, I'll have some.
I'll have some too.
They both took a sip. Instantly, their agitated expressions softened. This coffee is delicious. Haven't had such good coffee in a long time.
Yeah.
I hadn't expected the sweet coffee trick Julian told me about to work so well in easing the mood. Catching Julian's eye, she winked at me discreetly.
Mom, can Julian and I have some coffee too?
Sure, I'll make it. Julian promptly volunteered, standing up to prepare 3 more cups. Watching this, Karen suggested, Julian should learn cooking and coffee making from Mom here. I'd like that. Later, as my son, Karen, and Julian chatted, Donnie checked the time and said around 8 p.m.
Karen, shall we head home?
Oh, you want to go somewhere else? If you're meeting someone, feel free to go.
What are you implying?
Donnie retorted, but Karen didn't respond. Take care on your way home.
Thank you for everything today. What's Julian going to do?
I'm going home with my parents today.
I hurriedly called a taxi, and when it arrived in about 5 minutes, I gave the driver a little extra money. Just as the 3 of them were about to get into the taxi, Karen said to me,
Can we get the taxi fare from you?
Karen, there you go again with your brazen request. I'll pay for it.
It's okay. I already paid the driver.
Oh, is that so? Is the taxi just going to the station? Can we take it all the way home?
Mom, don't say things like that. Julian said this with a serious, angry look, pushed her parents into the taxi, got in herself, rolled down the window, and said to me,
Thank you for today. It was fun and the food was delicious. Despite how my mother is, she's actually really happy.
Please, come visit again. After the taxi with the 3 of them drove off, Lucas said to me,
Karen is always like that. When I first visited Julian's house, she asked where the gifts were before even saying hello. It really surprised me.
Lucas chuckled. But Julian is a very kind girl, so it's all right. It's funny how different their personalities are, even though they're mother and daughter.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Donnie seems decent at least.
Lucas said this with another chuckle. As summer approached, and it was almost time for family gatherings, Julian said to me,
My mother wants to have a family dinner here.
I had a bad feeling about, couldn't refuse.
Of course,
that's fine. I'll prepare the meal with care. Lucas, who heard our conversation, chimed in.
I wonder if Karen will say something odd as usual?
I'll make sure she doesn't say anything strange.
Thanks. I hope this dinner goes well. If she starts anything odd, I'll step in too.
Sure,
Julian said to me.
Then I'll let my parents know later.
On the day of the family gathering, Karen and Donnie came to our house after a long time. Of course, I paid for the taxi. It's been a while since you've been here. I said this as she looked around the house like she did before. As I was preparing dinner, Karen, looking at the meal, said,
For a family gathering, it should be pizza, right?
I thought to myself, here we go again. Then Lucas, who was nearby, silently took the meal away. Seeing this, Karen turned bright red with anger.
What's this? Such rudeness! I'm never coming to this house again.
Then Donnie said bitterly,
Yeah, you're not coming anymore.
What do you mean?
That means you no longer have the right to come here.
What nonsense are you talking about? Stop this nonsense.
The words "stop this nonsense" are what Julian has been saying to you for a long time, but you never changed.
What did I do?
I can't live with you anymore. We're getting a divorce.
On hearing the word divorce, Karen became even more agitated.
What do you mean, divorce? Fine. I'll grant you a divorce. You'll realize how grateful you should have been for me once you're alone.
Julian, listening to her parents' argument, said while crying,
Mom, please leave. I'm exhausted too. Why are you always complaining about Lucas and his family? What don't you like about them? Julian, how can you say that after all I've done for you? Is this how you repay me? You're the only mom I have. I won't abandon you, but please,
Don't come here again. If you really want me to be happy, just do as I say. Fine, I leave. I won't bother coming back to this poor-looking house again.
Karen left with those final words. Donnie watched her leave, then turned to us.
Sorry for the disturbance. We argued all last night, too. I warned her not to say anything strange at Lucas' house. I told her it would be over if she did, and well, here we are. My apologies.
Dad.
Julian cried and hugged Donnie, who silently comforted her. Donnie, are you sure about this?
Yes, it's final. She didn't keep last night's promise.
I understand, Julian said through tears.
It's sad, but she never listened no matter how many times we told her.
Let's not dwell on this. Let's eat. I'll bring the dishes from earlier.
I'll get them.
Julian stood up and brought back the dishes she had taken away earlier.
Let's eat? Yes, let's.
Let's eat.
Please enjoy your meal at your own pace. I'll bring you some coffee afterward.
That delicious coffee? Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
And so, the evening meal turned into a joyful occasion. 3 months passed. Donnie came to our house and officially reported that he and Karen were divorced. Then Donnie said,
She seemed to have wanted to divorce me from the start, thinking it would be disadvantage her to initiate the divorce. She kept making trouble statements on purpose. Her plan was to say awful things to Marilyn and Lucas, spark an argument with me, and then use that as a reason for divorce.
How did you find that out?
As soon as we divorced, she started living with a man I didn't know. A despicable woman.
Oh my!
She was having an affair, wasn't she? So I told her, give me a compensation settlement for the divorce. And she promptly transferred enough money to buy a luxury car.
The other man must have been wealthy.
Well, it seems like the man has already taken advantage of her.
Oh dear.
It turns out he grew tired of her and left. And when he did, he took all her valuables. Rich people sure are stingy with their money. Now she's penniless, living in a cheap apartment and working on a cleaning job at a nearby supermarket.
Oh my!
I spoke to her recently. She's lost weight, probably due to the unfamiliar work, and I had a vacant look in her eyes.
Does Julian know about this?
Yes, I told her. Julian used to be concerned about her, but when she learned about the affair, she felt disappointed and scornful.
Is that so?
I think it's for the best.
Perhaps as long as Lucas and Julian are happy, that's all that matters to me.
Right.
The following month, an elderly woman visited us. It was Karen, but she was so thin and haggard that she looked completely different.
Please let me live here with Julian. I have no money.
I'm sorry, but that's not possible. Please leave. After Karen left, I made sure to lock the door securely. That night, Julian was smiling happily.
Oh, what's the good news?
Julian, still smiling, said,
I went to my OBGYN today. The doctor says I'm 3 months pregnant.
The moment I heard those words, tears welled up in my eyes.
I want a boy, but Julian wants a girl. What do you think, Mom?
I'm happy with either.
Don't think I'm grateful just because you paid that much money. Tina, who is my son Philip's wife, was suffering from a rare disease. So I had paid $28,000 for her treatment, draining all my savings, unable to bear seeing her in pain. However, it was how they treated me. Aren't we family? If so, you're supposed to do this much, right? As Philip hurled these words, exactly. But once you get the money, you're useless. Got it? You're an eyesore, so don't bother us anymore. Even Tina uttered such harsh words. Who do they think I'm paying this money for? It's hard to believe that someone in need of surgery and suffering from illness could act like this. Afterward, when Tina's primary doctor disclosed something to me, I decided to take my revenge. My name is Helen. Now in my mid-50s, life seems to be on the downhill. I was dedicated to my work in my youth. Before I knew it, I was approaching 40 and still single. Then, during a mistake at work, Alexander, who would later become my husband, helped me out. Thank you. You saved me. I don't know what I would have done without you. I was truly grateful to him. That incident brought us closer, and we eventually started dating. It was a late-blooming romance. We would go out for meals after work, or I'd cook at his place on our days off. As lost his wife, he lived with his middle school son, Philip. Whenever I visited, Philip clearly showed his dislike for me. Alexander asked, "Hey, do you think Philip dislikes me? He seems to obviously avoid me." It's just his age, I guess. I went through that phase too. He'll come around. He didn't seem to take it too seriously. I need you, and Philip needs a mother. If it's okay with you, would you marry me? And then, he proposed to me. I had resigned myself to being single for life, but the idea of living the rest of my days as Alexander's wife and mother to his son didn't seem bad, so I accepted his proposal. Thus, my life in Alexander's home began. Having lost my parents and having no siblings, perhaps I longed for a family. I was truly happy to have my own family. Yet, Philip stubbornly avoided me. "Good morning." Even when I greeted him in the morning, yeah. That was all he would say. Still, I believed that he would eventually open up to me. Philip would retreat to his room after meals and we hardly talked. Alexander didn't say much about it either. I didn't understand the dynamics of a father and son, but it seemed Alexander saw a bit of his younger self in Philip. However, Alexander was diagnosed with cancer 2 years later and passed away, despite treatment. I felt as if my heart was being torn apart, losing my family again. Philip was still in high school. A young man with a future ahead of him. I worked harder than ever, thinking that seeing him off into society would be my way of repaying Alexander. Thanks to the assets Alexander left and the insurance money, I could support him through college. He found a job, and I thought my responsibilities were finally over. 10 years after Alexander's death, Philip now fully independent. Still didn't talk much with me, but showed no intention of leaving the house. "I've got something to talk about. Is that okay?" It was rare for him to initiate a conversation. It's rare. Or rather, it's probably the first time it's happened. "Of course. What is it?" He said he wanted to get married and asked if they could live here together. "Why hesitate? It's your house. You should live together." I was happy. In nearly 15 years of marriage to Alexander, I don't think he and I had ever really talked. I thought he had finally grown up. Philip and his wife decided against a wedding ceremony and just submitted their marriage registration to start their cohabitation. "Nice to meet you." The wife's name was Tina. She looked somewhat pale. "She's got a chronic illness and is frail. You'll handle all the housework." "Thanks." Was he still not accepting me as a mother? "We're relying on you," Tina said with an untroubled smile. Leaving everything to me might be too much. It would be nice if they could help a little. From that day, I started being treated like a housemaid by the couple. "Oh, I can't eat this, so can you please not put it in front of me?" Tina always had something to complain about the meals I prepared. I'm sorry. Do you have dietary restrictions due to your illness? I'll be more careful next time. Please forgive me." I wasn't sure how to interact with her. She needs to regularly visit the hospital because of her condition. Be considerate, will you? I understood that she had a chronic illness requiring regular hospital visits. Indeed, she seemed to be spending entire days at the hospital about 3 times a week. I was working full-time, so I didn't know much about their daytime activities, but I could fully appreciate that it must be tough. Still, I wondered what illness she had. Even with these questions, I continued living with them. "Make sure you clean our room too." I'm tired, so at least ready a supper for me. Seriously, you're so inconsiderate. Philip would say, then Tina would assertively add, I get dizzy and feel like I might collapse if I move too much, so I'll leave all the cooking and laundry to you. While in this house, I felt like I was their maid. A month after we started living together, Philip revealed Tina's illness during a conversation. Can I talk to you about something? He approached me uncharacteristically humbly. Apparently, Tina had a kidney problem and was undergoing dialysis 3 times a week at the hospital. Each session cost about $300, totaling around $4,000 per month and approximately $48,000 a year. A staggering amount. She's on a waiting list for a transplant, but that's going to cost money too. Can we figure something out? He continued, looking serious. How much will it cost? I asked. Between $28,000 and $30,000, I guess. If she gets the surgery, she won't need weekly hospital visits anymore, and we won't have to spend more. Please help us. I had never been asked for something so earnestly before. Okay. I'll give it. Nothing is more important than life. Tina's attitude seemed more understandable, considering she was battling a serious illness. They had already incurred a significant amount of debt for medical expenses. To protect the future of these 2 young people, I promised to pay. Here's $28,000. Use it wisely. I withdrew the money from the bank and handed the envelope to Philip. Thank you. I feel bad about this. I was a bit concerned about his reaction upon receiving the money, but I assumed it was just the stress of handling such a large sum. However, the next day, you think we're grateful just because you paid? You think we're family, right? Then it's only natural for you to pay. Philip hurled these words at me. Once we get the money, you're useless to us. Can you stay out of our lives for good? Tina continued, her face pale. Honestly, can you leave our house soon? I've been tolerating you so far, but you're just an eyesore. I couldn't believe these unexpected words from Philip. Was I the only one who thought we could become a family? Unable to bear the sadness and frustration, I packed my things and left the house. Having impulsively left the house, I had nowhere to go, as I had no other relatives. For the time being, I needed to find a place to stay. I decided to stay at a budget hotel near my office and think about my future. I had thought of Philip and Tina as family and wanted to be a real family. That's why I listened to Tina's story about her struggle with a serious illness and decided to pay for the surgery. I was carried away by emotion and handed over a large sum of money, but when and where would the surgery take place? Was it even confirmed? I often heard about waiting lists for transplant surgeries, but wasn't that usually for hearts or something similar? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I hadn't been informed about any crucial details. I decided to inquire about Tina at the hospital where she was supposedly receiving dialysis. I'm sorry, but due to privacy concerns, we can't disclose information about our patients. Are you a family member? The word family stung my heart. Yes, she's my son's wife who lives with us, and she always seems unwell. I'm worried and keep asking, but she tells me nothing. Even though I insisted, the hospital couldn't provide any more information. I contacted several other hospitals that seemed relevant, but again, patient information was not disclosed. However, I learned that dialysis treatment is indeed expensive. But there are subsidy programs available that reduce monthly costs to around $100. If that's the case, Philip's claim of being burdened by debt from treatment costs seems very dubious. Upon reflection, many questions arise. Why didn't I realize this sooner? In my eagerness to be liked by them, I had lost sight of myself. I decided to hire a private investigator to look into their backgrounds. I felt guilty for suspecting my own family, but I was concerned about the whereabouts of the $28,000 I had given them. If it truly went towards surgery costs, that was fine. But if they treated me as a nuisance, I could write it off as severance money. I searched online for a detective agency and visited their office. The private investigator listened intently to my story. So, you want to know if your son's wife is really undergoing treatment? Is that it? The investigator asked. Yes. They suddenly changed their attitude and kicked me out of the house right after I gave them money for the surgery. I replied tearfully, "That's terrible. Perhaps they were after your money from the start? I'll look into it, so please leave it to me." The private investigator assured me with a gentle smile. To reassure me, he answered with a gentle smile. I decided to wait for the results of the investigation, feeling anxious. It took about 2 months, but I finally got a call from the detective agency. Since it's not feasible to stay in a hotel for months, I rented a reasonably priced house nearby and started living alone. Let me start with the conclusion. Tina does not seem to be undergoing artificial dialysis treatment. Hearing that, I felt as if something that had been nagging at the back of my mind had been resolved. "So, what about her pale complexion and the hospital visits?" I asked him. It seems she does have symptoms of anemia, but nothing immediately life-threatening. What a revelation. I was speechless at his report. Does that mean everything, except her complexion, was a lie? "What about the money needed for surgery?" In response to my question, he said, "It seems they just wanted money to have fun. They were borrowing from all over, you know? Looks like they took advantage of your kindness and deceived you." The shocking investigation results were reported calmly by him. Anger welled up from the depths of my heart. I was genuinely concerned, and to think Philip and Tina exploited that for their gain infuriated me. I decided to stop showing unnecessary concern. No matter how much I invested emotionally, they were ultimately someone else's children. I thought I had devoted myself for nearly 15 years, but that feeling suddenly cooled. From that day, I began plotting my revenge. Some time passed, and Philip repeatedly called my mobile phone, but I completely ignored him. Half a month later, when the time seemed right, I responded to his call as if nothing had happened. "Oh? It's been a while. Has Tina's surgery been scheduled? Is she doing well?" When I said that, "What the hell is going on? Since the other day, real estate agents and surveyors have been coming and going, and I thought it was strange. Then I hear this house is on the market? This is my house, isn't it? Who said you could sell it?" He was furious. His voice through the mobile phone was so loud it almost hurt my ears. "Your house? No, it was built by Alexander. And now, I'm the owner. You essentially evicted the landlord. I don't need to live there anymore, so I decided to sell it and buy another property. You better start looking for a new home." As I said so, his voice grew even more furious. "How dare you? This house was built by my father, so it should be mine now that he's gone. What right do you have to claim it, coming in later?" He yelled angrily. "So, you know nothing? Well, I never told you." I explained to him about the time Alexander passed away. When Alexander died, Philip was a teenager. Deeming him too young to manage the assets, Alexander left a will entrusting me with everything, including enough savings for Philip's college education. "Take care of Philip," were Alexander's last words. I never told Philip that. I had planned to eventually transfer the land, building, and Alexander's assets to Philip, and didn't see the need to mention it. I never imagined being betrayed like this. "You could have at least pretended to get along as family, even if just in form. Then, eventually, it could have been yours," I said with a tinge of regret. I had truly wanted a genuine parent-child bond, but that dream had ended. "Or are you planning to buy the land and house yourself? As a family sale, I might give you a discount," I teased Philip. "It was supposed to become mine in the first place, right? Just transfer it to me already," he replied irritably. "Whether it's a gift or transfer, it's not free, you know? Understand? Driving me out was a mistake." I was determined not to back down. "The $28,000 you took from me, that wasn't for surgery, was it?" I had everything checked. The story about Tina needing a transplant surgery to survive, being on dialysis, all lies, right? Just to get money for yourselves. I'll never forgive you." As I declared so, "Wait, hold on. She really is frail. You have to believe that." He started to panic. "Even that is just a case of severe anemia, not immediately life-threatening. Be prepared." I will get back the money you scammed from me," I said firmly. Then he retorted, "It's all nonsense. Besides, we're family, right? There's no way this can be fraud." "Family, you say? How can you even say that? Since I married your father, not once did you seriously talk to me. Still, I tried my best to watch over you, keeping my promise to Alexander. Do you understand?" I felt like crying, thinking back on everything that had happened. Just because we're family, it doesn't become a non-crime, does it? But sadly for you, I plan to sue for being deceived. Isn't that what happened? You lied and took money from me. After I finished speaking, "How could you?" He was speechless on the other end of the phone. "I will consult a lawyer based on the investigation results from the detective agency. Can you discuss the rest with them? After all, you don't think of me as your mother, and I no longer think of you as my son. You're nearly 30, handle the rest yourself." With that, I hung up the phone. The dispute with Philip and Tina didn't end easily. They claimed residency rights and refused to vacate the house, so we ended up negotiating through representatives. However, their act of deceiving me and taking my money backfired, and the negotiations broke down. They were forced to move to Tina's parents' house. It seems they concocted the lie about needing money for fun and to pay off debts they had accumulated elsewhere. They based their story on Tina's chronic anemia and frequent doctor visits, eventually landing on artificial dialysis and kidney transplant after some online research. They must have thought it was dramatic enough and that someone like me could be easily fooled. Though I was at fault for not verifying the information and giving them money, taking advantage of someone's feelings to scam money is unforgivable. I realized that no matter how much you try to connect with some people, it just doesn't happen. As a result of the lawsuit, they were ordered to repay the money they took from me. Since they couldn't pay it all at once, they agreed to monthly installments. Additionally, they were ordered to compensate me for 15 years of mental anguish. I ended up buying a room of condo with the money from selling the house and land and now live there. Living alone for the first time in 15 years is quite comfortable, but sometimes I feel lonely. During those times, I think family would be nice, but I can't live with someone else now. Moved into Tina's parents' house, the couple are working to repay the money they stole from me. Tina, who claimed she was too anemic to work, is now working to pay off the compensation, pushed by her parents who reasoned that if she had enough energy to have fun, she could earn some money. As for me, I'm thinking of relying on a nursing home when I get older and can't take care of myself. Nowadays, even with close relatives, caregiving is hard. It feels more difficult with someone you're not related to by blood. Rather than being cared for with caution, I think it's easier to pay for proper care. That might be the way things are now, but it's still lonely. Those 15 years I devoted without a second thought, though ignored by Philip, now seem like a time that let me experience what family is. I don't know how many years I have left, but I want to live without regrets.
Ow, it hurts. I can't take it anymore.
Daniel collapsed as he said this. "Don't just stand there. Call an ambulance." Susan panicked. No, I don't want to. I answered like that. My name is Emily, and I'm turning 29 this year. I work at a design office, assisting with image editing. Basically, my job is to process images and do some design work. It's not that the pay is bad, but the hours don't really match up with the salary. Well, that's pretty common in this industry. I too got married last year before hitting 30. My husband Daniel is a year older, 30 years old. Daniel is an accountant. He's from a completely different world than I am. And Daniel's dad is a high-profile lawyer. Daniel's parents' home is filled with professionals like lawyers and doctors, and the guests at our wedding all had rather stern faces. They're not bad people, but I tend to avoid casual conversation with them. On the opposite end, I graduated from design school, and all my friends are quite flashy. Our reception was color divided down the middle, as if marking territories. Everyone thought I was marrying up with someone like Daniel, but that's not really the case. Even as an accountant, unless you open your own practice, you don't make that much money. Daniel only managed to pass his national exam after 4 attempts, putting him at a lower status among accountants. Of course, he hasn't started his own practice. His days are filled with organizing documents for senior accountants at a firm owned by a friend of his father-in-law. My job, helping designers and meticulously cropping images, is pretty much the same as his. But together, we make enough money, and being an accountant is a stable job. In an industry like mine, where the highs are highs and the lows are devastating, marrying Daniel felt like a blessing. Our married life is quite busy, with hardly any time spent together. We only see each other in the evenings and mornings, and we rarely eat together. But we're young, and I suppose this is just what it's like for dual-income couples. However, it wasn't quite the same for Daniel. I guess married life wasn't what he had imagined. As the marriage passed the half-year mark, the complaints and snide comments started. Given his profession, he always approached discussions with pure logic. Honestly, though, they sounded like nothing but unreasonable excuses. Even his way of speaking seemed logical, but came across as utterly self-centered. "Hey, is breakfast ready yet?" "Didn't you ask last night what we'd do for breakfast? You didn't decide then, so how could it be ready?"
"I decided a moment ago, didn't I?"
"A moment ago isn't literally just now. Do you really think I can prepare it that quickly?"
"You're useless, I swear. You wouldn't last a day in my office."
"I'm not an employee at your office, Daniel."
"Don't sweat the small stuff. Are you talking back to me now?"
Yeah. I've got to head out soon, so I've left this and this out for you. Just plate it and eat whatever you fancy."
"You expect me to do it? This is because your planning is terrible, right?"
"My planning? Maybe if you could make a decision for once."
"What a nasty woman, always having to have the last word."
I left the house listening to Daniel's complaints. Before we married, Daniel said,
"I'll share the housework. We both work, it's only fair. I won't make much money at first, so Emily, I need you to work hard too."
And now, share the workload? There's none. Help? Not at all. It's expected that I should take care of him. His attitude has become archaic after marriage. And then there's always the comparison with his mother, Susan.
"My mom did all the household work, without a word of complaint. And then there's you, Emily. All excuses and shoddy work because of your job. Aren't you embarrassed?"
That's rich. I do my share of the housework. What do you mean by household work? Just looking after you, right? We both work, so why don't you take care of your own stuff? Before we were married, you were all about sharing chores. How about we forgive the household duties and you manage your own affairs?
"What did you say?" "Forget it."
These exchanges had become routine. Sighing, I convinced myself that even couples who seem happy on the outside probably have their issues too. And then something happened to make me feel even worse. Once again, it was mother-in-law Susan. After such arguments, or rather exchanges with Daniel, it was inevitable that I'd hear from Susan.
"Emily, I heard from Daniel. What's this about you not making him meals?"
"Susan, did Daniel tell you that?" I don't want to speak ill of him, but the fault lies with Daniel.
"How could you, his wife, blame Daniel?"
Can we talk later? I've got a meeting starting soon." So tiresome, the same thing over and over. To be honest, I'm not fond of my parents-in-law's house. Father-in-law is a highly respected veteran lawyer, known as the acquittal artisan, and mother-in-law was a housewife raised in an upper-class family. In a house where the busy father-in-law was hardly ever present, she and Daniel lived a life of indulgence. On the contrary, father-in-law has always been strict with Daniel, scolding him properly even now when necessary. Father-in-law, a sought-after lawyer nationwide, often travels to courts far away and frequently leaves home on business trips. When he does, Susan still summons Daniel back to his parents' house.
"Today, since Daniel's on a business trip, I'm going to make your favorite curry. Hurry home." "Thanks, Mom. I'll be right there."
Back when we were dating, before we got married, Daniel kept this spoiled side of him hidden. So it came as a real shock to me when, after we got married, I was confronted with this mama's boy persona, especially during meals at my parents-in-law's house. If the timing was right, I used to join them. The table was always laden with more food than we could possibly eat. Daniel always started eating first. If I tried to eat before him, Susan would invariably scold me.
Emily, what are you doing? You need to wait until Daniel has finished eating. You're supposed to take care of your husband's leftovers. That's what daughters-in-law do. Hearing this, Daniel would just smile and nod, seemingly pleased. Once Daniel finished, the women would start their meal. All I could hear while eating was Susan's endless talk about how the wife of Daniel should be, how to support and care for him. Even as I ate, the food seemed tasteless amidst such conversation. And after meals, I wasn't allowed to relax. While Daniel sat back with a beer in hand, happy as can be, I was handed a shopping list by Susan and sent out to run errands. I wasn't even allowed to use the front door. The wife of Daniel uses the back door, she would say. By the time I finished all of Susan's errands, I was completely exhausted. That's how terribly uncomfortable it was at my parents-in-law's house. However, since I often had to work on weekends, and I didn't go there all the time, I just resigned myself to thinking of it as a form of endurance. But lately, I've noticed a change in Daniel. He started stopping by his parents' house after work on weekdays, and on weekends, he'd say he was staying over at their house, hardly spending any time at our own home. It started to seem suspicious. Feeling a bit doubtful, I sometimes called my parents-in-law's house. Sure enough, Daniel was there. Nothing overtly suspicious seemed to be going on, but something else was strange. Now, on occasions, when it seemed I could join them at my parents-in-law's house, Susan, who had previously worked me to the bone, started saying things like, "Emily, why don't you take it easy and rest on the weekends?" As someone who disliked their parents-in-law's house, I was actually pleased with this change. So in the end, Daniel was the one who went off to my in-laws' house alone. That's how it continued for a while. Our home and my parents-in-law's house are about a 30-minute drive apart. We only have one car, which we both use. Daniel uses it every time he goes to my parents-in-law's house. I can get to work just by taking the bus, so I rarely use the car, except for shopping. And since Daniel commutes by train, the only time he uses the car is for his visits to his parents' house. One day, I went shopping alone, in that car. Then, I noticed a long strand of hair on the passenger seat. Huh? I have a short haircut, and this long hair isn't mine. I don't remember letting anyone else in the car. Could it be? Is he cheating? While I had that thought, I also wondered when he would have the time. Lately, Daniel has mostly been at my parents-in-law's house, except for work. He spends weekends there too, and there's no sign of him going out at night, so it doesn't seem like he has the time to cheat. So I asked Daniel about it. "Hey, you've been hanging out at Susan's place a lot recently. What are you up to?" Why are you asking me that all of a sudden?" "Well, you're there on weekdays, and even stay over on weekends. I was just wondering what you do all the time."
"It's nothing much, just relaxing, studying. There's a lot of law books at the parents' house, right? Even as an accountant, I need to have a broad knowledge, so I study there."
You're quite the studious one, aren't you?"
Yeah, I guess."
Something feels off. Come to think of it, Daniel has been complaining less to me recently, and there are no calls from Susan either. It was a relief until recently, but now it seems suspicious. With a firm resolve, I decided to hire a detective to investigate Daniel for infidelity. A few days later, I received the investigation report.
"Emily, to get straight to the point, Daniel has been seen with a young woman with long hair."
"Ah, I knew it."
"However, what's strange is that he seems to only accompany her to his parents' house."
"To the parents' house?"
"Therefore, we couldn't confirm any infidelity. As a precaution, I will report his movements. Daniel always meets this woman on his way to the parents' house, lets her in the car, and then they head to the house. There's no evidence of infidelity or anything similar happening in the car. After arriving at the parents' house, given that the mother-in-law is there, we don't believe that an affair is taking place. That's our conclusion."
"So you're saying there's no definitive evidence of an affair, but at least he's meeting this woman frequently?"
"Exactly. If they were meeting anywhere else, it might be a different story, but since it's the parents' house, it's difficult for us to investigate further."
The detective's reasoning seemed solid, but when it comes to Daniel and his family, what's normal for others might not apply to them.
That's what I thought. One day, I started a certain plan. This weekend, I'll be going to Seattle for a shoot, so I'll be away. All right, then I'll go back to the parents' house alone. Sure, say hi to Susan for me. After watching Daniel leave from my parents-in-law's house by car, I took a taxi and headed to their house ahead of him. As I expected, I arrived first, so I decided to watch from the back of my parents-in-law's house. Eventually, Daniel's car with a woman arrived. At the entrance, Susan greeted them with a happy smile. Welcome! You two always look so good together. You're making me blush, Mom. Oh, Daniel, are you blushing? That's cute. Come on in. We have a feast prepared for today. As they interacted, after entering the parents-in-law's house, I retrieved the back door key of their house from the car. I always use this car for shopping for my parents-in-law's house, so I left the back door key in it. I quietly unlocked the back door and entered the house. No one was in the kitchen, but I could faintly hear the shower running from the shower room. I peeked into the shower room. There, I found the woman's clothes and underwear from earlier. Indeed, she was the mistress. Who else takes a shower in a stranger's home so suddenly? Daniel was meeting his mistress at his parents' house, and Susan was helping them. Contempt over anger. That was the emotion I felt towards them. What kind of messed up family conspires in adultery together? First, I made sure the mistress couldn't escape by starting the washing machine with the clothes and underwear I found in the shower room. This way, the mistress had nothing to change into. Alerted by the noise, the mistress called out from the shower. Daniel, what is it? Can't wait? Even with your wife around, you're really eager, aren't you? It seems this mistress knew Daniel was married. If she knew and still engaged with him, it was clearly an affair. Excuse me, who might you be? I'm Daniel's wife. The mistress froze in shock. She'd be stuck, naked for a while. Leaving the shower room, I headed to Daniel's room upstairs. I knocked furiously on the door, shouting, Daniel, you're in there, aren't you? I kicked the door open, but the room was already empty. All I saw was an open window. Looking outside, I saw a man running, nearly falling. Such foolishness. Daniel must have jumped out in a panic. He must have hurt himself somewhere. Clutching at his arm and chest, he got away. Well, it's fine. This is my parents-in-law's house. He only has their house or his own home to return to. He'll come back here, I thought. I went downstairs to the living room. Susan, who was sitting there elegantly, was very surprised to see me. Emily, you were here. Yes, I told Daniel earlier. Didn't you hear? Susan was in a fluster, sweat visibly unable to stop. She kept nervously checking towards the shower room behind the kitchen. Naturally, the mistress was there. From Susan's perspective, it would be terrible if the mistress showed up here. But no worries, the mistress couldn't come out. The table was set with a lavish meal. Susan, this meal is amazing. I'm sorry you went to all this trouble for me. Oh, well, I wanted to do something special for you, Emily. I went upstairs to call Daniel for dinner, but he wasn't there. Is it okay if I start eating? Of course, of course. Go right ahead. I wonder where Daniel could have gone off to. Susan hurriedly dialed Daniel's number. Ah, Daniel, your dinner is getting cold. Please hurry back. What? Are you okay? Yes, I'm fine here. I'd usually be left with Daniel's leftovers, but today I indulged to my heart's content. Then, as if nothing had happened, Daniel appeared. Oh, Emily, you were here. Yes, my business trip got canceled suddenly. You saw my WhatsApp message, didn't you? I hadn't actually sent any message, but that was beside the point. Daniel looked really worried. He was protecting his upper body, maybe in pain. It must have been from a fall. Daniel, aren't Susan's dishes delicious? Aren't you going to eat? I might just finish everything here. At first, Daniel seemed unconcerned, but soon his face turned pale, and he was sweating profusely. Susan, perhaps preoccupied with the mistress, seemed unaware of Daniel's condition. The mistress, it seems, was quietly hiding in the shower room. Click. Turning towards the sound, I saw Daniel, pale as a ghost, dropping his knife and fork. It hurts. I can't take it anymore. Oh.
With a groan, he collapsed. Susan screamed out,
Daniel, what's wrong, Daniel?
"Oh dear, Daniel, you were really hurt, weren't you? Your shoulder is all twisted."
Emily, don't just stand there. Call an ambulance.
"What? No, I don't think so." I responded with a slight laugh. "Why don't you ask the mistress, hiding in the shower room, to call for help?" Susan looked even more shocked.
How do you know that?
"I'm full, and I'll be leaving now."
Emily, acting like this when you're Daniel's wife.
"Susan, please don't treat me as Daniel's wife anymore, okay? You know everything, right?" Saying that, I pulled out a recorder from my pocket. As I pressed play, the mistress's voice filled the room. "Daniel, what? You can't wait? Even with your wife around? You're so eager." It was an annoyingly sweet voice. Susan turned bright red and looked down. Defeated, she called the ambulance herself. Soon after, we could hear the siren of the ambulance. The paramedics were administering first aid, and while Daniel regained consciousness, he couldn't talk or walk due to the intense pain and was carried out on a stretcher. I had no intention of accompanying him, so I headed to my car. Just as I was leaving, a middle-aged couple rushed in with great urgency.
What's going on here? Are you holding my daughter captive? She called us for help.
They seemed to notice the ambulance.
What's this ambulance for? What happened?
It appeared to be the mistress's parents-in-law. The mistress must have called for help using the mobile phone she left in the shower room. But to lie about being locked in, well, this mistress wasn't your average person either. Daniel and Susan hung their heads low in shame.
Where is my daughter? Aren't you her fiancé? What's this about being held captive?
The mistress's dad pressed in on Daniel, who was on the stretcher. It seemed he just then became aware of my presence.
Excuse me, who are you?
Me? I'm Daniel's wife.
What? That can't be right. Daniel is supposed to be single.
No, Daniel is my husband. The confusion was written all over the mistress's parents-in-law's faces.
Daniel, you had a family? You were seeing my daughter while married?
Without heeding the paramedics' restraint, mistress's dad yanked Daniel from the stretcher.
Father-in-law, it hurts. It's really painful.
He might have had a broken shoulder or ribs for all we knew. Daniel wailed in pain. Mistress's mom was also screaming.
This isn't what we agreed on. Susan, what is going on? It's not like that. It's different.
While witnessing the hellish scene, I left my parents-in-law's house. Of course, I never went there again. Later, my divorce from Daniel was finalized. I demanded alimony from Daniel, Susan, and the mistress in the divorce proceedings. I had been curious why the mistress's mom was so familiar with Susan, but it turned out Susan disliked me indeed, introducing Daniel to a friend's daughter. She had lied that Daniel was a once-divorced bachelor at the time. Law is a tricky beast. It turned out that Susan's tolerating Daniel's infidelity didn't seem to qualify as a reason for claiming compensation. So I claimed for the repeated emotional abuse from Susan instead. The emotional abuse that the parents-in-law claimed by their daughter was as ignorant as they were about Daniel's marriage, just deceived. But when I played the audio from the shower room, they agreed to a lump sum compensation. Emotional abuse she knew about Daniel's ongoing marriage when she started seeing him. Yet driven by a desire to marry an accountant like Daniel, she dove into the affair. As expected, Daniel and Susan refused to pay the compensation. So I turned to father-in-law's office for resolution. That seemed to do the trick, and they paid up promptly. Father-in-law, upon learning all this, was furious. He divorced Susan quickly and cut ties with Daniel. Daniel had always lived under father-in-law's management. He had to quit the accounting firm, and, unable to find another job, he's now apparently working part-time at some restaurant. All that effort to pass the exams and get his qualification 4 times over seems pretty foolish now. Susan apparently started a part-time job too, both living a life of poverty. Now I reflect on my inability to judge people correctly. That feeling of discomfort at the wedding never did go away.
Recently, I've been given more responsibility in design. First things first, work. I'm building a life where I don't have to worry about my partner's title, just living my life. And today, as always, I keep pushing forward. Something's off. In the locker room at work, my colleague Stephanie spoke up. When I asked what happened, she said that she didn't have enough money in her wallet. Come to think of it, I felt the same way recently, but I thought maybe I just miscalculated because I had locked it. We both tilted our heads in confusion. My name is Jennifer. I'm a 42-year-old part-time worker and a housewife. I live with my husband and child. I've been working at the supermarket for 5 years. The workplace is a small supermarket. The owner started the store, and there are 2 other supermarkets of the same scale. There's a separate store manager, so the owner isn't always around, but he's a friendly guy who sometimes comes in to greet even the part-time staff. Since the store is small, everyone knows each other's faces and names, and part-timers generally get along well. Stephanie, who joined around the same time as I did, is a year younger, and we became close after discovering our kids are in the same class. We started our part-time jobs around the same time, and now we even go to cafes and take our kids out together. The other day, Stephanie and her child came over to play, and the kids were engrossed in their recent favorite role-playing games.
I'll have this, please.
That'll be $10. Watching the kids play like this always warms my heart. One day, a cute woman named Amanda joined our workplace. She's 32 years old. She looks younger than her age and is quite cute, so she's popular among the male employees. At first, we thought Amanda was a nice addition to our team, but that changed within a week. While she keeps up her pleasant demeanor around the male employees, her attitude toward us is terrible. She readily blames her mistakes on us and often chats with the male employees instead of working. Although no one from the staff has addressed this, we've decided just to focus on our own work. We've even mentioned it to the store manager, but nothing came of it. Amanda is married, but apparently doesn't have children. I'm not particularly interested, so I don't know much more than that. However, I recently found out she likes the bakery next door. Next to the supermarket, there's a small bakery run by a husband and wife team, and I often stop by to pick up some bread on my way home from work. The bread is delicious and affordable, making it easy on the family budget. Plus, the kids absolutely love it. I've run into Amanda there before. Even though our eyes met when I greeted her, she ignored me, so I've decided not to speak to her anymore. Despite this, while I was eating lunch in the break room, Amanda came in with the store manager. "Hey Jennifer, are you going to the bakery next door again today?" She asked this in a strangely familiar tone. "Huh?" I managed to keep my surprise to myself and responded with a forced smile. Watching all this, the manager turns to Amanda and praises her, saying how amazing it is that she can get along so well with the other part-timers, as if that's something to be praised for, like we're in elementary school or something. Observing all this, I couldn't help but feel that the manager and Amanda seemed oddly close. I wanted to say, she always ignores me, even when I say hello, but I decide not to. No need to make an enemy. When men are around, Amanda suddenly becomes friendly to us as well. To those who don't know the situation, it might even seem like she's everyone's idol. From our perspective, it's hard to see why, but I suppose some people are easily fooled. Sometime later, as I was finishing my part-time shift and opening my locker, Stephanie, who had also entered the locker room, spoke up.
"Huh, that's odd."
She was looking through her wallet, and out of concern, I asked her what was wrong. "What happened?" Stephanie mentioned that she felt like some money was missing. Come to think of it, I had a similar feeling the other day. But the only places I would leave my wallet are at home or in this locker room. I always lock my locker, so it's hard to believe a family member would take it, so I had brushed it off as a misunderstanding. Upon telling Stephanie about this, we both grew uneasy. Theft in such a small supermarket? It's not like our wallets were completely empty. $100 bills and coins were still there. It was just that the number of $10 bills seemed a bit off. We didn't want to cause a commotion over what might just be a misunderstanding. So Stephanie and I decided to keep an eye on the situation and report to each other if anything else happened. We did consult the store manager, but he dismissed it as likely confusion and didn't take it seriously. Since then, we've been cautious not to carry much cash in our wallets. Exactly 1 week later, as my part-time shift ended, and I headed to the locker room with Stephanie, I had the distinct feeling that something in my locker had been moved. Upon checking my wallet, just as I suspected, the $10 bills were missing. Stephanie hastily checks hers and reported the same. It was also a Wednesday last week. The staff who work on any given day are pretty much fixed, and our supermarket holds sales on Tuesdays. Consequently, customer traffic and staff numbers are generally lower on Wednesdays. The people who work on that day are Stephanie, Amanda, the store manager, and a few male employees. Only Stephanie, Amanda, and I use this women's locker room. Amanda usually leaves a bit before us, so she would have the locker room to herself. It would be possible for her to commit the act. But how? We always lock our lockers. Confused, Stephanie and I decide to head outside for now. As we walk past the bakery next door, during our way home, we see Amanda buying bread. We know she often shops here. I wonder if our money is being spent here, Stephanie said with a sigh mixed in. Indeed, I also sighed, but had an idea as I heard those words. Hey, do you think this is going to continue? I whispered to Stephanie, who reluctantly nodded. Since the amount of money taken each time is small, the perpetrator probably thinks it's going unnoticed. The aim might be to steal a little at a time over an extended period. That was the conclusion Stephanie and I came to. Stealing larger bills all at once would increase the risk of getting caught, and housewives like us, who are just here for part-time jobs, don't usually carry a lot of cash. It's unclear how much this was premeditated, but leaving the $100 bills and only taking the $10 bills seems cunningly smart. Just to be sure, we consulted the police. Then I remembered some kids who were engrossed in their pretend play had brought in toy money yesterday. The toy money was surprisingly realistic. You'd think it was real if you only took a quick glance. I shared the plan I had come up with to Stephanie. Jennifer, that's a great idea. Stephanie immediately agreed, and we began to set our plan into motion. We started taking action towards our plan, and a week later, after finishing work, we headed to the locker room. The first thing we checked upon opening our lockers was the contents of our wallets. Just as I thought, it's reduced again. The 4 $10 bills that should have been there had reduced to 3. Stephanie, who had entered the locker room with me, also checked her wallet and looked in my direction. 2 of my $10 bills are missing too. We exchanged glances and wore sly smiles. After getting our things, we hurriedly left the supermarket. Our destination was the bakery next door. As expected, Amanda was shopping inside. When we entered, Amanda looked at us and ignored us. Business as usual. We did some shopping while keeping an eye on Amanda's actions. She hurried to the cash register to check out, and we got in line behind her. Then the cashier who was handling Amanda's payment made a troubled face. I'm sorry, but you can't use this money. The clerk said this to Amanda with a puzzled look. What? Why? I'm a regular here. Hurry up. Amanda yelled at the clerk. Behind her, Stephanie and I started a conversation. Speaking of which, I left that toy money the kids were playing with in my wallet yesterday. Upon hearing this, Stephanie also said, Oops, me too. Kids that age really want to use the real thing, don't they? Of course, the money was just toy money, but I did lend them a wallet. At that moment, I didn't miss Amanda's body reacting to our conversation. The clerk, perhaps not wanting to embarrass Amanda, was indirect at first, about not being able to use the money she had offered. But when Amanda didn't get it, the clerk was blunt. This is toy money, you know. Don't you have any real cash? Hearing this, Amanda began to panic. She took a close look at the money she had offered and went pale. Then she turns to us and says, Jennifer, could you lend me some money? Since there were no other customers around, I asked Amanda, What's the deal with that toy money, Amanda? You don't have kids, do you? A flustered Amanda was at a loss for words. I peeked over at the register and said, Oh, that money looks like what my kids were using. Mind if I take a closer look? Turning over the toy bills. I found Stephanie's child's name written on one. Flipping another bill, I found my own child's name written. Amanda, what's the meaning of this? When I said that and looked at Amanda, she went pale.
We briefly explained the situation to the bakery clerk and took Amanda outside. Would you care to explain? Confronted, Amanda glared at us. You tricked me, didn't you? Hearing this, we both laughed. Well, perhaps, but isn't the real wrongdoing stealing someone else's money in the first place? Upon being questioned, Amanda incredibly began to brazen it out. It's just $10. You're calling that stealing? Stephanie and I exchanged glances at her words. Just $10. What kind of nerve do you have to say something like that? Whether it's $1 or $5, theft is theft. Even so, making me lose face like that in public? Amanda glared at us, but seemed to be at a loss for words. We put a lot of thought into this. At first, we thought maybe we were mistaken about the contents of our wallets. But both Stephanie and I noticed similar things happening multiple times, and they always coincided with days you'd come into work before leaving early. So we thought something was up. We noticed that you always shop at this bakery on your way home, and since they only accept cash, we put toy money in our wallets. We didn't think you'd actually try to use it without noticing. We thought you'd realize and stop stealing, but that wasn't the case. At my words, Stephanie also laughed. Amanda glared at us, but seemed at a loss for words. I continued. When we first noticed, we spoke to the manager, but he brushed it off as a misunderstanding. That seemed odd to us. Is he an accomplice? Because we lock our lockers, and the only person managing the spare keys is the manager. Did you use that to open our lockers without permission? I wondered if the manager was just ignoring me because he thought it was too much trouble. But if he's complicit, I can see why he'd insist it's a misunderstanding. But given Amanda's visible discomfort, we might not be far off. If you apologize and return the stolen money now, we might be willing to forgive you. We gave her the option, but she didn't seem inclined to apologize. Amanda retorted, "You don't have any proof that I did it. This money was given to me." Then she stormed off, glaring at us. We had consulted the police about this, so we thought about withdrawing the complaint if Amanda apologized and returned the money. But after seeing her attitude, we were fed up. Moreover, the money exchange at the bakery could serve as solid proof, and yet she claimed it was given to her. But if that was really the case, then who would be the perpetrator? A few days later, while Stephanie and I were at work, the police showed up. The manager and Amanda were also in the back room. We had consulted the police, so they came to investigate. Amanda, perhaps scared by the police, admitted to the theft. Amanda's husband flew in, pleading with us to drop the charges in exchange for a settlement payment. There were others who had been robbed, but because the amounts were small, everyone agreed to settle. The ones who suffered the most were Stephanie and me,
likely because our work schedules made it easier for us to be targeted. During the police interrogation, questions arose about how Amanda had gotten hold of the spare keys. The manager insisted he had no idea, that Amanda acted alone. But since he was the one managing the spare keys, it wasn't something a part-time worker could just take. I thought perhaps the manager, as an accomplice, had decided to throw Amanda under the bus. But what I learned later was unexpected. I had been intrigued by Amanda's earlier statement that the money was given to her, so I decided to ask her directly. You said the money was given to you. Does that mean the manager actually stole the money and you just received it from him? We had assumed Amanda was the definite thief, but the theft happened inside the locker room, where there was no surveillance camera, and the moment of the crime was not captured. I didn't intend to defend Amanda, but if there was an accomplice, blaming her alone wouldn't sit well with me, and I wanted to clear up any uncertainties. Upon hearing my question, Amanda looked down, and the manager, who saw this, became furious.
Are you trying to pin this on me? You're the one who stole it.
Amanda also erupted in anger. You're the one who said we should go out and have some fun with the stolen money. You gave me the spare key. You're the one who told me to shop at the bakery next door because you like it. Amanda suddenly confessed. Listening to her, it appeared that she and the manager had been having an affair. It made me feel sorry for Amanda's husband, who had to hear all this in public. However, Amanda's husband seemed to be around my age and was very composed. He had suspected the affair and said he would insist on compensation, but was not considering divorce at the moment. He would monitor the situation until the settlement and compensation money were fully paid. Just when we thought this was the end of the matter, a few days later, the manager's wife stormed in. To be precise, he was now the former manager. By the time the police arrived, the president of the company had learned about the incident and immediately demoted the manager. We're not sure what the president's plan is to do next, but for now, the manager hasn't been fired. He's been instructed to properly hand over his managerial duties. The wife who stormed in apparently called the former manager and Amanda to ask for compensation. I initially thought Amanda would quit the supermarket, but her husband told her to continue working until she finds another job, so she's still here. Because the former manager's wife came in during business hours, the regular customers also got wind of the situation. Plus, she also explained the situation to the couple who run the bakery next door, so the rumor has spread there as well. Amanda and the former manager have become somewhat infamous. Eventually, Amanda found the situation too uncomfortable and ended up quitting. According to the part-time staff network, someone spotted her working at a restaurant near the next station over. The former manager is still showing up for work as he is in the midst of handing over his responsibilities, but he looks worn out, presumably due to the unfolding divorce proceedings. Rumor has it he'll quit once the handover is complete, so we'll likely only see him for a few more days. We've received the settlement money, and it's a relief to know we weren't wrong in our suspicions. I have to thank the kids for playing pretend. It gave me the idea for the sting operation. To show my gratitude, I'll stop by the bakery next door today and buy the kids' favorite bread to bring home.
Claiming allergies as an excuse for pickiness isn't good. I wonder if it's because your parents didn't take proper allergy precautions when you were little. Sneered my mother-in-law, glancing back and forth between me and Dad, mocking my sister. Then, as if suddenly remembering, she raised her voice in an exaggerated tone. She can't quite cook or clean well enough. Maybe she wasn't properly taught. She's pretty, but it's a shame about those things, she said, looking at my sister's husband for agreement. He too was smirking nastily. They can laugh now, but only for a moment. After angering us, the mother-in-law will lose everything. My name is Angelia. I'm 28, single, living alone, and actively working as an office employee. It's about time to consider marriage, but I'm enjoying work and don't have a specific partner, so I think it's still a way off. It was then I heard about my sister's marriage. My family consists of my self-employed local father, housewife mother, and my sister Eleanor, who is 3 years younger, A family of 4. Dad adored us sisters and let us do as we pleased. Mom always watched us and Dad with a smile, and I think we were a picture-perfect happy family. Eleanor, my younger sister, was adorable and charming, winning over everyone regardless of gender. There were times I felt it was unfair how cute she was, but her affectionate sis made me forget all that. Dad, the eldest of 5 brothers, mostly lived near his siblings, so we had a lively extended family. Mom got along well with aunts and uncles, so there were many family gatherings. At that time, Dad's youngest sister, an aunt, had a late pregnancy and gave birth to a girl, so the family gathered to celebrate and meet the baby. Though Dad's sister, she was more like a sister to me, being only about 10 years older. I was happy for her and excited to meet the newborn, so I returned home after a long time. While chatting with my aunt and marveling at the miracle of life upon seeing her tiny newborn, cheers erupted from where Eleanor was. Glancing over, I saw a slightly drunk Eleanor, her face flushed pink, unsteadily holding a glass of unfamiliar alcohol. That's what happens when you drink alcohol you're not used to. Thinking I should help my probably overzealous sister at the celebration, I stood up to go to her. Then my cousin Christina, noticing me, looked up in surprise and started talking excitedly. "Angelia, is Eleanor getting married?" "Eh?" I must have looked utterly foolish and surprised at that moment. I had heard she had a boyfriend who was a tall, handsome civil servant who would pick her up after work. But marriage? I looked back and forth between Christina and a tipsily smiling Eleanor. "I hadn't told Sis yet." Christina, looking surprised, seemed to sense my need for a proper explanation from Eleanor and quickly left. With Christina gone, I sat down in the chair next to Eleanor, still warm from her. I took the glass Eleanor was holding dearly and put it on the table, then held her cheeks in my hands, turning her face towards me. "What does this mean?" "I'm sorry." Eleanor finally apologized, sensing my intimidating aura. Upon questioning, she revealed that she wanted to tell me directly, and even asked our parents to keep it a secret. She planned to talk to me about it now that I was home, but before she found the right moment, she got drunk and ended up spilling it to Christina in her joy. Typical Eleanor, unable to keep a surprise. But somehow that was endearing too. As I listened, I stopped caring about being kept in the dark and went around telling everyone, including the part about it being a secret. The relatives all laughed, saying that's so Eleanor. There's one more thing I haven't told Sis. More? I don't think there can be anything else. Go ahead, tell me, I asked gently. Eleanor, relieved, began. When I marry, I'll have to move in with Jeffrey's parents next month. Jeffrey was Eleanor's boyfriend, now her husband. I was genuinely surprised by this sudden news. Living with his parents? Are you sure it's okay? Eleanor reassured me with a smile, saying she had met them several times and they were wonderful people. Eleanor's marriage announcement and the upcoming move meant she wouldn't be able to come back for a while, so that day we all had a great time. I heard this story at the beginning of last month, so she must have moved by now. I was thinking of calling her soon when my mobile phone rang. It was just before midnight. Who could it be at this hour? I wondered, peering at the screen showing Eleanor. As I thought about the incredible timing and tapped the call button. Hello? I was surprised. Before her voice, I heard Eleanor sniffling, clearly crying. Sis, sorry for calling you out of the blue. Her voice was a little shaky, as if she didn't want me to know she was crying. I could tell she was trying to sound upbeat despite being on the phone. "It's totally fine. What happened?" I asked, trying to sound normal so as not to worry her. "Actually, I'm at the hospital right now." Eleanor's voice broke and she started crying. "Hospital? Why? Is her husband with her?" I had many questions, but I decided to listen first. "I was rushed here. I'm sorry, but could you come pick me up?" I wondered why she asked me instead of her husband or in-laws, but I guessed they couldn't. I asked for the hospital's name and told her I'd be right there. It was late at night, so I got to the hospital quicker than expected. Eleanor was sitting small in the hospital lobby. I rushed over to her immediately. Up close, she looked much thinner than last month, and her face was pale and exhausted. I sat beside her and asked if she was okay. "I'm sorry for calling so late, but I'm feeling better now." "That's good. But why were you rushed here?" She didn't seem to have any major injuries, so I asked what had happened. The next words from Eleanor made me doubt my ears. "I ate nuts." I blurted out, "What?" Eleanor has a nut allergy. We've always been careful with her allergy, and nuts were never on our family's table. "Why? Did you eat them by mistake?" "No, Campbell." My mind went blank. I couldn't believe someone would knowingly give her nuts. I asked if she had told mother-in-law Campbell about her allergy, and Eleanor, with tears in her eyes, turned to me and said, "Of course I did. But she said that using allergies as an excuse for pickiness isn't right." Eleanor continued, saying that even when she looked to Jeffrey for help, he just said nuts are delicious and she should eat them. Feeling pressured and thinking a small amount might be okay, she ate them. Then my breathing got worse, and when I asked to go to the hospital, no one listened, so I called an ambulance myself. Campbell even accused her of faking her illness to make her look bad. "I didn't want to go back to that house, so I called you, sis. I'm sorry." As Eleanor cried and apologized, I held her hand and assured her it was okay. My hand holding Eleanor's trembled with anger. "Let's go back to my place for now. Is that okay?" "Yeah, thank you, sis." So we decided to go back to my place in my car, and on the way, I suggested consulting Dad about everything tomorrow. Eleanor was worried about troubling our parents, but I convinced her that not saying anything anything would worry them more. The next day, after calling in sick to work, I left with Eleanor for our parents' house. Dad, surprised to see Eleanor, greeted us at the door. Sensing something was wrong from Eleanor's condition and my serious face, Dad quickly let us in. After telling Dad everything, he muttered a quiet acknowledgement, having listened silently. "Are you feeling better now? Stay home and rest today," he said. Eleanor nodded and Dad gave her a comforting smile. Then, turning to me, he said he needed to talk. "Angelia, are you off work today?" "Yes, but why?" He wanted me to accompany him to get Eleanor's things, reasoning that there might be female-specific items she'd need. Of course, I agreed to go with Dad. To Eleanor, who looked a bit worried, I said, "Don't worry. You look pale, so rest and eat Mom's cooking, okay?" Eleanor smiled weakly, understanding. While I was worried for her, I got into Dad's car and we headed for Eleanor-in-law's house. The car ride was mostly silent, but I could tell Dad was quietly angry. Arriving at the in-laws, we rang the doorbell and Jeffrey came out. "Sister-in-law? And Marcus too?" He seems like the same smiling, good-natured young man I'd met once. I wondered if he really lacked understanding about allergies and couldn't protect Eleanor when needed. "Hello, about Eleanor." "Eleanor hasn't come home. Do you know where she is, sister-in-law?" Jeffrey interrupted, as if inconvenienced by Eleanor's absence. Biting back a retort about contacting us first if he was worried, I calmly replied, "Eleanor is at our parents' house now. After being rushed to the hospital, I picked her up and she stayed at my place." Jeffrey laughed out loud at my words. "Emergency transportation for nuts? That's an exaggeration. It wasn't serious enough to call an ambulance," Jeffrey said dismissively. I almost glared back in response, but Dad intervened. "Eleanor won't be coming back here for a while, so we'd like to take her things for now," Dad explained. Jeffrey seemed shocked at this. "Not coming back?" As Jeffrey began to confront Dad, a voice sounded from inside. "Jeffrey, what's all this commotion about?" It was Jeffrey's mother, Campbell, rushing in with loud footsteps. Campbell's face momentarily showed disgust at seeing me and Dad, but she quickly forced a smile. "Well, well, Eleanor's dad insists, isn't it?" Though I was taken aback by Campbell's initial reaction, we exchanged greetings. "Mom, Eleanor's upset about yesterday and says she's not coming back," Jeffrey complained in a whiny tone. I had a bad feeling and secretly started recording on my mobile phone, which was set to record mode in my pocket. "Yesterday's issue? You mean the nuts? Eleanor is just picky, calling it an allergy." Campbell continued, her smile from before still in place. "She only wanted to eat some delicious nut-filled bread." Eleanor's issue isn't about being picky. She's had a nut allergy since childhood, reacting even to food prepared with utensils used for nuts, so we've always been careful," I said, barely containing my anger. Jeffrey butted in. "Well, about that, when I was little, I had a milk allergy. But Mom gradually introduced it to me, mixing it into food, and I overcame it," he boasted as if praising his mother. Campbell laughed along, agreeing. "Maybe Eleanor's nut allergy is because her parents didn't take proper precautions when she was small, right?" Campbell said with a sneering smile, looking between me and Dad. Then, as if remembering something, she raised her voice artificially. "Eleanor's cooking and cleaning were never great. Maybe she wasn't properly taught." "Pretty face, but such a shame," she said to Jeffrey, who smirked nastily. Feeling like I would explode if I stayed any longer, I announced that we would take Eleanor's belongings and asked Jeffrey to show us where they were. "It's fine. Eleanor needs to overcome her allergy and learn housework, Campbell said cruelly before disappearing inside. Quickly gathering Eleanor's things, I left the in-laws' house as if escaping. On the drive back, I was filled with anger, but Dad seemed even more furious. Dad, who usually drives safely, was unusually aggressive on the road. When we got back home, Eleanor rushed to greet us. She immediately sensed something had happened and repeatedly asked if we were okay. "What are you planning to do now, Eleanor?" Eleanor looked as if she remembered something, then looked down. "Honestly, they didn't seem concerned about you at all," I said. Eleanor looked up with a bitter smile and responded, "I guess I was hoping for too much, huh? It was never going to work out." It was probably just as I had imagined, and she had a few tears in her eyes as she looked into the distance. Considering how Campbell spoke, it wasn't just this incident, but maybe there have been problems before. "They threw away my food because it was too flavorful, and they spilled drinks on areas I just cleaned," she said. It was as awful as I had feared, almost too painful to hear. But I always thought we'd understand each other someday. Seeing Eleanor's tired smile made me realize how much she had endured. But after this, I realized we'll never understand each other. "I think I want a divorce," she said, almost relieved. Dad nodded deeply, acknowledging her strength. "You've done well so far. Leave the rest to me," he said. Eleanor and I were surprised and looked at Dad, who had a mischievous smile as if he had a plan. A few days later, Dad said we were going to pick up Eleanor's furniture, and we drove to her in-laws' house. "Hey, won't we need more than 3 people to move the furniture?" Dad laughed heartily. "Don't worry, I've arranged everything." I wondered what he meant, but trusted Dad's assurance. As we arrived at the in-laws' house, apprehensive about meeting them again, cars started pulling into the parking lot one after another. The rural home had a spacious parking area, quickly filling up. Eleanor and I were surprised when our relatives started getting out of their cars. "Now we won't have any trouble moving the furniture," Dad said, greeting the arriving relatives. I realized what he meant by arrangement. Noticing the commotion, Campbell and Jeffrey came out of the house looking flustered. "Eleanor! What's this all about, bringing such a large group all of a sudden?" Campbell and Jeffrey looked ready to pounce on Eleanor, so I stood protectively in front of her. Dad then stepped in front of me, smiling at the two of them. "Thank you for the other day. Eleanor's planning to divorce, so we're here to collect her belongings." Campbell frowned at this. "Divorce? We haven't heard anything about that, and Eleanor's belongings were already taken back, weren't they?" Despite the tense atmosphere, Dad continued smiling. "Most of the furniture here Eleanor had been using since living alone. We've brought about 23 relatives to help move it." With that, Dad gestured to our relatives, who started entering the house. Jeffrey tried to stop them, but ended up following them inside. Remaining outside were me, Eleanor, Dad, Campbell, and 2 others. This is a lawyer, and this young lady is Christina, a cousin of the 2. "A cousin? What does she have to do with this?" Campbell scrutinized Christina from head to toe and scoffed. "She's just a child." Indeed, Christina was still a college student. While I wondered why Christina was here, she began to speak. "I study law at university. After hearing Uncle's story and Angelia's recording, I came because Campbell could potentially be a criminal." Christina spoke calmly. Indeed, she was smart in studying law. Forcing someone to eat something knowing they have an allergy carries criminal liability. Campbell laughed dismissively. You're just a student, not a professional. I can't take you seriously. She covered her mouth, trying to hide her smirking expression. Christina remained unfazed, continuing in the same tone. Expecting such a response, I invited a professional lawyer, not just an amateur. Campbell seemed to have forgotten about the lawyer's presence until then. Upon realizing, she finally looked at the lawyer. This case could involve compensation in the divorce proceedings, and of course, the divorce will go through, the lawyer said. Hearing this, Campbell's face turned increasingly pale. She rushed to Eleanor and grabbed her hand. Eleanor, you're not really planning to divorce, are you? I've been so worried about you since you fell ill. Let go of me. Eleanor interrupted Campbell's words and shook off her grip. It was unusual for the always smiling Eleanor to glare at Campbell. When I collapsed, not a single one of you cared, just eating away as if I wasn't even there. I will proceed with the divorce and claim compensation in the court, Eleanor declared firmly. Just then, Jeffrey's cry came from inside the house. Mom, all the furniture in the house is being stolen! Eleanor exclaimed in disbelief. Stolen? You're the one who brought all my furniture here without asking, claiming it was new. I bought that furniture with my own money. Campbell grabbed Jeffrey's arm to stop him from retorting. I overheard her whispering to Jeffrey about the presence of the lawyer. Thanks to our relatives' efficient work, the furniture moving was already completed. Dad, after thanking them, turned to a pale-faced Campbell and Jeffrey. We've collected all the belongings, so we'll be in touch through the lawyer. As we turned to leave, Dad paused and looked back at Campbell. There have been cases where forced ingestion of allergens led to death. It's fortunate that didn't happen to Eleanor or Jeffrey when he was young. His smile was there, but his eyes were not. We all got into the car. At first there was silence, but then Dad broke it with laughter. The looks on their faces were priceless. Seeing Dad's genuine smile, which I hadn't seen in a long time, Eleanor and I started laughing too, and the three of us laughed all the way home. It was a moment of true laughter after a long time. Eleanor's divorce was officially finalized later. The in-laws' house was left empty after we removed Eleanor's furniture. They had sold their original furniture, expecting to use Eleanor's, and squandered the money from that sale. With no savings left, the in-laws' house quickly became known in the area for their harassment of Eleanor and moved away, almost fleeing. Campbell and Jeffrey reportedly work all day to pay off the compensation and cover moving and furniture costs. Eleanor's health is slowly improving, and she is staying with me until she finds a new place. Living with Eleanor again after years, I sometimes find it noisy, but also comforting to return home to someone. Laughing together just like old times, I'm enjoying every day with Eleanor.